It'll be a long 6 minutes.
Thank you, Minister. Right, okay, I'll go straight for it. So in terms of the North-South enrolment and your comments on that, I welcome some of your comments, Minister. I'm a bit concerned that you talk about what's already been done. And I would acknowledge the collaboration and the good collaboration between some of the institutes is there, and also in terms of the research hubs and the development there. And I think there's still obviously greater potential there, but as we know, it's the student mobility part of it I think we really have to take very serious. I am disappointed, and maybe we can have further discussions on this, of why I deem that we need to have targets. So it's a bit like, you know, increasing the female representation in politics. If we don't have targets, I feel that we're going to be, you know, we're a quarter century after the Good Friday Agreement Committee, and or after the Good Friday Agreement. And it does concern me that we still have such a low number of students going from north to south and south to north. Now, there's a much wider thing here than education in terms of our peace and reconciliation, embedding that and increasing the understanding that we need across the island. And I see the way those who are at third level from north and south engage, and it doesn't matter, you know, what their constitutional aspirations are, the engagement that is there and that then spreads out in terms of third level institutes, I think is really positive, and it's something we need to do. And I would ask that maybe we would look with the shared island unit as well and see what further can be done there in terms of that. But I suppose I'd particularly like to highlight the recommendation around the adjusting grades from the A levels into Leaving Cert points, because I think that's probably the single biggest barrier to students from the north coming south. And it's become more acute in recent years as we've had the grade inflation, obviously, as well in this state. And I think it's something we need to look at further. Now, we'll have a number of witnesses, hopefully coming before the Education Committee here to discuss this further. So I'd ask you to keep an open mind in it and see what ways we can work together specifically to get rid of some of these barriers, because we know that it's easier. And I know this from talking to students and talking to parents from the north. It's easier for them to go to Oxford or Cambridge than it is to go to Galway University or DCU or one of those. So we have to hear that, and we have to try and unblock those things. So I hope we'll have further discussions on it. In terms of the funding, I do welcome the setting up of the review group. And I know you said in May of this year that the funding gap would be closed over the next 3 budgets. Is that still your intention? And just on the student accommodation, I want to ask you in terms of the affordability and the links to affordability in how you're going to ensure that, because if the third level institutions were to borrow all of the money, they would have to charge roughly over 12,000 a year to cover the cost of the student accommodation as it is, and that's not affordable accommodation, as I know that you will understand. The PD researchers, we talked last night about it, and I think we need to look at the apprenticeship model there and just to see what we can learn from that, and how we can put that into place as well. The Coro students, it's very, very important that each of those students have a place and have a pathway. You know, they really, what's happened to them needs to be lessons. There needs to be lessons learned for the future there. But I want to see each and every one of those students have a pathway, obviously be reimbursed. But, and I think we have a responsibility, albeit that their education was being provided by a private institute. That's not much time.
Thanks very much to Deputy Conway Walsh. I mean, just firstly to assure you that my position in relation to North-South is not just to list all that we're doing and all that we have done. I mean, I genuinely share your view, and I'm more convinced of it by the day from my engagement North-South, from my visit to Queen's, where I gave a guest lecture outlining my vision for an all-island approach to higher education over the summer months. It makes sense. Again, and I agree with you, regardless of one's political persuasion, the community one comes from in the north, on an island as geographically small as the island of Ireland, it makes sense to work together, just like we are in relation to healthcare. I also believe that makes sense beyond education, as I said in my opening remarks. It makes sense in terms of embedding peace, in terms of getting to know each other and having a better understanding. So a couple of developments. I mean, the HEA Act, as I'm delighted to now call it, because the HEA bill is now the HEA Act, just if anyone's wondering. So it is now the law of the land. We'll move to commence that. It does have, and we engaged on a committee and report stage on this. There's a very clear function now for the HEA in terms of the promotion of cross-border collaboration on higher education. So it's now a function of the Higher Education Authority very clearly and explicitly in that law. Secondly, we're currently carrying out a piece of research to try, and I don't mean this in any way in relation to your comments, 'cause you could throw it at me too legitimately, to try to move beyond maybe the anecdote in terms of student mobility and why do people come or not come, north-south or south-north. So we're doing a piece of research through the HEA at the moment to try and really get under the bonnet as to what's going on in relation to student mobility. We obviously have the common travel area, but north-south and indeed east-west, why is student mobility somewhat stuck? And we hope to publish
We've
that.
outlined that in the report, and that's why I think that, and I welcome that you're doing that, but I think it needs to be additionality in terms of what here, so maybe a deeper dive into the specifics.
I read your reports and take your recommendations on board, so we are proceeding with that to try and get a concrete understanding, an actual database as to what's going on here. But there's a number of actions, and I won't take too much time on this, but there are a number of real actions that we are taking to try and accelerate the all-island collaboration in both further and higher education. 2023 will see the development of the first all-island apprenticeship, likely in the area of construction. I mean, construction workers move around the island. It makes sense for the apprenticeship model. 2023 should see an all-island approach to medical education. And we're almost there. We have a bit of work to do, a lot of really good work going on by my colleagues in that. We will see literally this month, likely if not next month, significant announcements in relation to all-island research centres. And we'll talk about that. And also, as soon as tomorrow, I'll be being updated by officials on the work our government is taking to try and advance our commitments in New Decade, New Approach in relation to McGee. So there are, and I'll keep this committee, I know it's an important interest for this committee, and we'll keep you very closely informed. On the €307 million, yeah, look, it's my intention to close this gap as quickly as possible. I want to see this gap closed, ideally in the lifetime of this government. That's where the three budgets comment came from. I think it is true, and we've discussed this before, that in what became a cost of living budget, making sure people had food and lights and heat and the likes did obviously have to take priority in terms of the measures we took. However, we did manage to receive quite significant investment, and I was very pleased with how it has landed at the implementation group of Funding the Future. I'll send the committee a note rather than taking the committee's time on this, but the money, the additionality will see an extra 17.8 million for the universities and specialist colleges in terms of strengthening capacity and resources, effectively staffing, trying to see a reduction in the staff-student ratio. It will also see 17.8 million for the technological universities to strengthen their structural capacity, and again that's around staffing and staffing posts. It will see 2.4 million for increased funding in medicine places, and €2 million to develop. I'm particularly excited about this, to try and develop and co-design and co-deliver programmes between FET and HE. So these are additional things. These are Funding the Future measures. It's what the additional money will do, and I'll send the committee a detailed note on that. Accommodation and affordability, I think that's a very valid question. It's one that it's the focus of our work as well. I mean, we can't give over taxpayers' money and be silent or mute on the issue of affordability. I can't right now get to where we're going to get to because I do need a cabinet committee and cabinet approval, but I intend to go to the cabinet committee on housing this month, and we will be bringing forward proposals as to how we believe we can help get a number of projects unstuck that have full planning permission. That is step one. We have set up within the department a specific unit dedicated to student accommodation, and there are a number of ways of how you can slice and perhaps address the issue of affordability, and I'm very happy to come back to this committee once we have those proposals and have your views and your input in relation to that. On the PhD issue, you referenced last night in the Dáil and here again this evening the issue of the model, and you referenced the apprenticeship model. I referenced the issue of whether you treat a PhD student as a student or an employee. Different countries do different things. What's the best model? The scope of the review is broad enough to cover all of that. It was very clear this is not going to just be a review about what's the appropriate level of stipend. That's important, and the answer is it needs to be higher. But actually, what are the other issues that need to be addressed around terms, conditions, and pathways? Final thing on DBS, and again, in the interest of time, I can send you a note on this and the committee a note on this. The work here is ongoing. I mean, the committee will know there were a total of 85 learners impacted in relation to DBS. Yes, it is a private college, but I don't say that to wash our hands. We want to help. Of these, 15 were graduates from 22 and 21. 37, I believe, were part-time learners, and 31 were full-time learners. The 15 graduates, I do think have the option, and it's not to speak for them because I take the point of everyone being an individual, but I think they will be able to avail of grandparenting provisions to become eligible for the register. The existing students who have not yet graduated are the ones that need to obviously see how they can continue their studies. And I think both TU Dublin and potentially the OTC are options there, but conversations are ongoing, and we'll continue to keep you updated in relation to that.